be able, it's my hope that we can invite many more of our colleagues who we find, who we can see that this is relevant for them, and get them to be part of us. So thank you. So today's session, we're going to look at Agile in ITSM. So I am hopeful that you can see my presentation. And so I come from Wasuki Technologies, and we are partners with NTT Data, and we're working together to support you to adopt best practices and international standards when it comes to service management. So that is our focus. And so Wasuki Technologies, we are an Axelos consulting partner, as well as a PCB partner, and we provide training for Marsland and DevOps as well. So you can reach out to us as well. So for today's webinar, we have 3 topics that we'll cover under Agile ITSM. So we'll start off with what does Agile bring to the table, and then methodologies, and then finally challenges and tips. So that's what we're going to be covering today. All right, so we'll start off with an understanding of what is ITSM and what is Agile. So if you've been here in our previous sessions, we've tackled what ITSM is all about, and ITSM is all about service delivery. So how do we deliver IT services to meet the needs of an organization? So we need processes, we need people, we need technology, we need partners. And so the whole life cycle of services, how they are managed from planning all the way to delivery and continual improvement, that's what we focus on. And of course, there are many frameworks that guide us in terms of understanding best practices. And no one framework is enough. Obviously, you can take a mix of the different frameworks to see what works for your organization. Now, from a historical perspective, I'll pick the oldest framework, which has been the basis by which we've had ITSM, and that's ITIL. ITIL started out in the 1980s. And for those who studied ITIL, you understand that the original name ITIL meant Information Technology Infrastructure Library. So in the 80s, the focus was how you manage infrastructure to deliver IT services. And then as ITIL evolved through the years, then it switched to a more process-centric approach. And then the last iteration was now focusing more around value. And from this survey that Axelos did towards the end of 2021, when they were looking at, what are the main challenges that organizations face in ITSM, you would see like the third reference is inefficient work practices. The fifth one, changing scope and expectation. Then at the bottom, you have poor communication. So these are some of the challenges that ITSM functions around the world face. And this was just quite recent, and it's still the same problems afflict us even up to now. And as ITSM has evolved, then Agile has come into play over the last 20 years. And of course, Agile started off in 2021, where there was a meeting by software developers to discuss lightweight methods, and they were bringing different thoughts around how to make software development easier and better. And the output of that was the Agile Manifesto. which obviously talks about how better ways of developing software. And so they came up with their manifesto. We have they value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and then responding to change over following a plan. So basically saying there's value on the items on the right, but the items on the left are more valuable. Now, if you think about traditional ITSM that was process focus, then you realize that in ITSM focuses a lot on the things that are on the right as opposed to things on the left. But now that is changing because of the evolution of ITSM frameworks to become more flexible in order to meet business needs. So the kind of challenges that ITSM was facing, then Agile seems to have some of the answers towards that. And so from that workshop in 2001, when they came up with their manifesto, then they came up with the principles. So there are 12 principles of Agile, and basically looking at satisfying the customer, welcoming changing requirements, delivering working software frequently, having business and developers working together, building projects around motivated individuals, promoting sustainable development in our processes, having working software as our primary measure of progress. Best communication is through face-to-face, continual attention to technical excellence and good design. Simplicity is being essential. The best architecture arises from self-organizing team, and then at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective. So those are the principles. And when we think about these principles, then we realize that from our ITSM practices, we can actually get value if we adopt some of these agile principles in terms of how we work. Now, there is a state of agile report that has been carried out annually, and it's now in its 17th state. So this was published earlier this year. And if you look at the top reasons why organizations adopt agile, one is about delivering value. And so the focus around agile, what do we want, is around delivering business value. And you want to do that through prioritization and incrementally. You also looking at speed. What do you want? Time to market faster. And then you also want agile because of digital transformation and delivery predictability. So those are some of the top reasons why we are doing that. And so if we compare traditional approach to ITSM versus agile, we notice that the traditional approach differs in some respects to agile, where our methodologies were mostly focused around processes and procedures, while agile is talking about principles that focus on value. In terms of value, the traditional approach was looking at comprehensive processes and long-term projects, but agile is looking at speed. So here we are looking at incrementing value, delivering value in an incremental manner and frequently with updates. In terms of our processes, they are linear, defined, predefined workflows from a traditional perspective, while agile involves flexibility. How do we do that? Iterative processes and close collaboration with stakeholders to adopt that change. So adaptability from the traditional approach was less responsive, while agile is more adaptive. Then when we look at customer focus, our core focus is whether or not we are aligning with processes and controls in traditional ITSM, but agile is looking more towards customer feedback and continual improvement. Collaboration, siloed teams, each team understands what it's supposed to do in traditional ITSM, while agile is looking more around cross-functional teams and active stakeholder involvement. For change management, the key here is minimize risk and ensuring stability when it comes to traditional ITSM, while Agile emphasizes rapid response and adaptability to change. Documentation is key in ITSM, so thorough documentation and adherence to following our policies. But in terms of Agile, we are more looking at working software. We're more looking at only documentation that is sufficient to point us to the working software. And so that's an understanding of what Agile provides. So looking at what we've understood from Agile, then what are the methodologies that we can think about that we can apply to ITSM practices? And so that switches us to our next topic. And before I switch to the next topic, I will open the floor. Do we have any questions or comments? Okay, so no questions so far from the group. I will, let me see if I can ask you guys a question. So allow me to pull up. Okay, I'd like you to, on your phone browser, open menti.com and then put in the code 49668492. So I want to ask you just one question around ITSM. So if you are able to go to menti.com on your phone browser or on your computer browser and then put in the code 49668492 and then just put a thumbs up if you're able to log in. Then we can be able to do one interactive question and then switch to the next segment. All right, I have one like already. All right, my second like, third one. All right, 6, 7, all right, good. Okay, so this is our first question. How flexible are your IT processes to accommodate change? So if you think about the organization you work for, how flexible are your processes? Are they rigid, or is there an opportunity to make some few changes, or you can make changes on the fly depending on the needs of the organization? Right, so far, from the 6 who've joined, we can see the majority, the big majority are saying that your IT processes are somewhat flexible. Okay, good. All right, so let's go back to the presentation. Okay, so then let's look at the second part. So how do we apply agile methodologies in ITSM? Now, when the writers of the ITIL 4 guidance, so the ITIL 4 best practice, which came out in 2019, when they evolved the best practice from ITIL v3 to ITIL 4, one of the things that was introduced is the ITIL guiding principles. All right. And so these principles were meant to be the overarching guidance in terms of if you are following ITIL best practice, what should be your underlying principles. And as they did that, what they end up doing is that because the focus had switched from processes to focusing on value through the establishment of a service value system, then they created a mapping between the Agile Manifesto and the ITIL 4 guiding principles. This was important in order to make anyone who's adopting ITIL 4 as your framework for best practice, then you can understand that it supports the adoption of Agile. And because one of the complaints with the previous versions of ITIL is that they were too process focused and they were not able to align with Agile. And so in ITIL 4, you have the guiding principles. So for instance, if you think about the Agile Manifesto, where we say we value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, then ITIL 4 guiding principle comes back with the principles for keep it simple and practical and start where you are. And so what we are saying is that if you keep things simple and practical in terms of how you run your IT service management approach, then you will actually realize that you will prioritize individuals and interactions over processes and tools. The other value statement was on working software over comprehensive documentation. ITIL 4 guiding principle says focus on value and think and work holistically. So if you focus on value, then what matters most is that the IT services are working effectively and you are delivering value to our customers. And that's what we are looking at. So when you're saying working software, then from an ITIL perspective, when you say we focus on value, what we are looking for is ensuring that our services are available and we are supporting the needs of our users and customers. If we think about the Agile Manifesto value statement of customer collaboration over contract negotiation, then focus on value, collaborate and promote visibility come into play. So when you say collaborate and promote visibility, then by so doing, you support the Agile value statement. And then finally, responding to change over following a plan, then ITIL 4 talks about progress iteratively with feedback and keep things simple and practical. So if you do that, then we are in alignment with the Agile Manifesto. So if you adopt ITIL 4, then obviously your framework from ITSM should align with what Agile stands for. Let's look at the Agile methodologies. Now, from the State of Agile report, most organizations use Scrum, and then the other popular framework that exists is Kanban. And so when you see Scrum, it takes usually the lion's share, and then you have Scrumban, which is a combination of Kanban and Scrum, and then you also have Kanban, and then you have other frameworks. So for this presentation, we'll just have an overview of Scrum and Kanban to just understand what they're all about, and then think about the application in an ITSM environment. So if we think about Scrum, when we read the Scrum Guide talks about Scrum is a framework that helps in generating of value through adaptive solutions for complex problems. So if you think about that statement, it's not about software development. It's about solving complex problems. So Scrum is a framework that helps in addressing complex problems through adaptive solutions. And if you think about our ITSM environment, we deal with complex problems a lot of times, okay? And so we can actually adopt Scrum as the framework for tackling complex problems. If you are tackling simple problems, then Scrum is not relevant for you. So that's something to think about. And so what is Scrum founded on? Two key elements, that's empiricism and lean thinking. In empiricism, we are thinking about transparency, where everybody knows what's going on. We're thinking about inspection, check your work, how you're doing it. and adaptation, adjust your direction. And if we think about these elements, then you can see that they can actually be relevant for IT service management. Transparency, everybody knows what's going on. Think about change management. What happens when sometimes we complain that we did not know about a certain change? All right, that means transparency is an issue. What about inspection? Inspection means that there is some level of quality control where we implement peer reviews in terms of the work we are doing to make sure that requests are fulfilled correctly, incidents are managed well, configuration records are kept in the right way. And so to make sure that there is quality, then we implement some level of inspection. And then obviously adaptation. If something is not working or customers are not are complaining or are unhappy about bureaucracy, then we adjust. And that's where lean thinking comes in, where we think about how can we reduce waste? How can we remove bureaucracy in our processes and practices? We can also think about the values of Scrum: courage, focus, commitment, respect, and openness. And ask ourselves the question, when it comes to our own culture within our ITSM teams, do we practice these values? Is there courage among us? If someone ran a change that caused an outage, are we courageous to be able to come out and say, hey, I messed up. Hey, we should tackle that root cause? Do we have respect? Do we listen to people? Are we open about our processes? Are we open about our knowledge? So we can think about the Scrum values as a way of adoption. And then there is the Scrum process where you have a backlog, then that goes into different sprints. Then you hold daily Scrums to create an increment that undergoes a review with the stakeholder. And then the team comes back and holds a retrospective to ask the question, what did we do well? What can we do better? All right. And as organizations adopt Scrum for solving complex problems, then you can think about, the ITSM challenges we have, like things we need to address, like technical debt, like improvement initiatives, like solving of problems, and we can actually use the Scrum framework to actually address these complex problems, where we would list them on a backlog. Then we would have sprints in which we would pick some elements from the backlog and put them in a sprint backlog, and then have one dedicated team which daily reviews the progress in terms of what has been achieved against the sprint backlog through the Scrum, the daily Scrum, and then at the end of the Scrum period, present to stakeholders what they've carried out in terms of the sprint review. And then the team itself holds a retrospective after each sprint to identify opportunities for improvement in terms of our way of working. And then this goes in. This is very applicable for our ITSM teams. Then think about Kanban. In Kanban is all about optimizing the flow of value through a visual pull-based system. So what do? We define and visualize a workflow, and then we actively manage items in our workflow, and then we think about improvements. So in terms of Kanban, for those who are familiar, we would see a board, and in actual sense, Kanban means visual sign or card in Japanese. And then in terms of our workflow, we would move work from to do to doing, and then finally to done. And this helps with transparency. This helps in collaboration. This helps in communication. And obviously, if we adopt this in ITSM, then the entire team has a place in which they can visualize and understand what is the team working on currently, what is pending, what needs to be done. And then if you actually combine this with Scrum, in terms of Scrumban, then you can decide to track the sprint backlog using a Kanban board. And then the team is very well aware in terms of what we are doing and what has been completed and what is pending. And that can be useful in terms of understanding the flow of work, we can understand demand better, we can prioritize better, and we can communicate to stakeholders what is our status with regards to resourcing, with regards to blockers or delays, and it becomes very easy since understanding a Kanban is very easy across an entire ITSM team. Now, the other thing around adopting Agile is that not just our way of working has to change, but also we have to think about our structure as a whole. Okay. Now, McKinsey came up with this diagram in terms of moving the organization from being a machine, which is mechanical in nature, to actually become an organism. And so when you move from being a machine where you operate on a structured process, then you become an organism that is adaptable. And so how does it look like? The traditional organization operates from a top-down hierarchy where you have multiple layers of management and then individual teams that operate on detailed instructions. And then this inevitably leads to bureaucracy and silos. And so how Agile organization looks like? Leadership is at the center and they show direction through strategy, and then they enable action through resources. And then the teams are built around end-to-end accountability. So think about a service where we are not saying, no, the problem is with database team, no, the problem is with networks, no, the problem is with the cloud team. Instead, you build a team around a product or a service, and that team has end-to-end accountability. And then we are able to move resources across teams quickly, depending on the demand and the needs of stakeholders. And then we also allow for inter-team communication where we break down silos. And so if you're adopting Agile in ITSM, one of the things you have to think about is that, does our structure facilitate Agile way of working? All right. Are we hierarchical, mechanical, siloed, bureaucracy promoting, or are we built around the team having full accountability, flexibility in terms of resources, and then open flow of communication and information? So those are some of the things to think about if we are looking at moving and becoming an agile organization. Obviously, as we change our structure, then we have to change our behaviors. And so we have to think about what is our culture compared to what Agile promotes in terms of the Agile principles, in terms of the Scrum values and the like. We have to ask ourselves, we in IT service management, do we promote transparency? Are we focused fully on the customer? Are we adaptable and we can easily change? Do we have shared ownership? And are we committed to continual improvement? If these behaviors are not present within your service management function or your IT department, then you need to figure out a way in which to adopt these behaviors, because that is the only way that you will become agile or adopt agile way of working. All right. And then you can now go into practical use of agile techniques within the common ITSM practices. So for instance, in incident management, instead of having the hierarchical approach, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and the like, then we use collaborative approaches like swarming, where we bring a team that has skills from all the different functions, someone from storage, someone from infra, someone from service desk, someone from applications, and they work together and brainstorm and come up with a solution that works. In terms of change management, we can move towards implementing iterative and incremental changes and looking for faster deployment. We can also look at tackling, our curbs, where we can see the curb being a bottleneck in our organization, and we ask the question, how can we make change more faster? How can we provide end-to-end accountability for teams in terms of managing their own changes and the like. So that's one way in which you can practically apply Agile. From service requests, we can look at prioritization of requests based on the value of the customer. So instead of a one size fits all for the requests that we offer to our customers, then we ask ourselves, what is the value of the customers? Because if we can support business, then if business is focusing on something, then the prioritization of the requests related to the priority business focus, they go first. We do not tell the business that we need 1 week while they are trying to catch a competitor who has already unleashed a product. Then we change prioritization based on the needs of business. So whatever business prioritizes, then requests for that particular strategic initiative should then become prioritized. And then for continual improvement, think about applying the Scrum framework and having retrospectives. So as a team, every month, you need to come back and ask yourself, as a team, what have we done well? What can we do better? And do it in a collaborative manner where it's not the team looking at the manager to come up with the improvements. Rather, it's the manager providing the resources and the team themselves owning the improvements. The team suggests their own improvements and they run it and they drive it. And that's something you can think about for becoming, adopting Agile. If you think about Scrum, then you might want to implement daily stand-ups within your ITSM teams where you hold short focus meetings in terms of what are we doing today, any blocker that is affecting you, and what are our plans. If we can do a daily stand-up, then what happens? It keeps the whole team aligned in terms of what is priority, in terms of what is what are the main issues we are facing, and then that allows management to tackle those things. Then look at cross-functional teams. So breaking down the silos, making sure that you have teams that can own the service management process end to end. And then in terms of our goals and KPIs, we make sure there is common alignment. We do not have a situation where one team KPIs are operated at a detriment to another team's. And you have that situation where teams throw issues over the wall, where I escalate things and I say I've done my part. Instead, we have common ownership. And then obviously hold the retrospectives. If you hold our team retrospectives, then we identify improvements and we always celebrate success. All right. We can also think about adopting Kanban. For Kanban, well, this might be relevant when you're operating a small team and you can visualize your tickets in a Kanban board, where you can be able to actually show the flow of work for our team. So during our daily stand-up, we can actually be able to say what is in our queue, what is pending, what is in progress, what is completed, what is closed. And if you visualize this, then it becomes very easy for your management team to understand how do we need to add resources? Do we need to change our way of working? Do we need to reprioritize? All right. And such decisions can be made by visualizing our work on Kanban. Now, some modern ITSM tools allow you to visualize your tickets in Kanban view. So you can think about adopting such solutions, or you can go the old school way where your team has sticky notes and then you can track your tickets. You can also track like your team's continual improvement initiatives. So every month when you hold your retrospective, you actually add things to your improvement backlog, and then you can track it through the Kanban. So if we are adopting these agile techniques within our ITSM framework, some of the improvements or benefits which we can showcase to management include enhanced service delivery from an efficiency perspective, improved collaboration and communication, enhanced change management and flexibility, optimal resource utilization and cost efficiency, as well as continual improvement and innovation. All these if you realize from a strategic perspective, are what businesses work towards. And so adopting Agile in ITSM is a no-brainer. So as an organization, you have to ask yourself, do we want these benefits? Then we have to be willing to make the steps to take our organization to where it is, all right? And so that's our second section of the day. And then we will move to our last section for the day, which is challenges and tips in adopting Agile ITSM. I will take a pause there. Any questions from the attendees?
Please remember to ask questions, seeing as we have a few vouchers and merchandise to give away.
Okay, so there is motivation.
And if you are shy to speak, please feel free to type your question on the chat.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So in the spirit of embracing Agile, especially on change management, how do you, there's a process, yes, and you want also to adopt Agile. How do you make sure that people do not take advantage such that they do not plan their changes on time? Because they know that you'll be flexible. If you plan, if the process says that change is supposed to be done probably on Wednesday, and people do not plan because they know in the spirit of being agile and supporting, and you'll be able to accommodate them. How do you go about that?
Thank you. That's a very good question. And it is a challenge. One of the things I ask organizations to think about is the types of changes that you've specified within your change policy. So usually when you talk about IT service management best practice, you usually find that they'll talk about types of changes, and you'll have like ITIL usually talks about a standard change, a normal change, and an emergency change. You can have other types of changes as well across there. And what happens is a lot of times is that organizations don't take time to actually outline what are the types of standard changes we have, what are the types of normal changes, what are the types of emergency changes, and do we regularly review it? Now, from an improvement perspective, what you would want is to be moving more of your changes away from normal to standard. And so what does that mean? If a team or a function is able to standardize their change approach, they've defined the sequence, they have scripts, they have implemented continual, CI/CD, so continual integration, continuous delivery, then we should be able to promote such changes to be pushed as standard changes. And you remember the textbook definition of standard change is a pre-approved change that is of low risk and can be done repeatedly. And so what we need to do is to equip and empower teams to actually structure their changes to become standard so that they can be pre-approved and they can be rolled out smoothly. And by so doing, then we embrace agility and speed. Now, of course, if a change is high risk, then obviously it cannot fall under the standard. Then it has to go through the normal challenge because of the evaluation for the risk, the coordination, the communication that is involved. And so if we constantly keep educating teams and constantly keep reviewing our list in terms of what are our approved standard changes, what are the types of normal changes we execute, and then get teams to move more towards more standardization, more automation of testing and deployment, then we can actually help teams migrate from the traditional bureaucratic normal process to the more smoother and efficient standard type of change. And so that's something that has to be done using retrospectives. So we constantly have to be reviewing our change models and our change approaches. Otherwise, if you keep it bureaucratic, then what will happen is that you'll have very few standard changes and most of your changes will be normal. And if that's the case, then teams will always complain that change is bureaucratic. So we have to deliberately say, if we are becoming an agile organization, structure a change to become standard. And if you structured it and the team proves it by successfully deploying the change without causing incidents or rollbacks, then we actually say now this type of change is signed off as being standard. If the team does their change but it causes an incident, then it automatically is moved to stay as a normal change and will remain a normal change until the team comes up with a different approach or methodology that can make it low risk and standardized. So that's one of the ways I would advise. So regular review of what consists of standard changes, and challenging teams, find a way of moving your change from being normal to being standard. So we do that using agile techniques, and then we promote that. Okay, great question. I want us to go back to Mentimeter and answer one other question. So I'll pull it up. It's the same one that we were using. Okay. So if you had closed your browser, you would open it again, go to menti.com and use the same code that we are using, 49668492. And so we're asking ourselves the question, rank the agile techniques that would be most relevant to your ITSM practice, all right? So we have 4 techniques there: incident swarming, continual improvement Kanban, daily team stand-up, and problem retrospective. So which one would you prioritize? So join Menti and then rank them. Which one would be your number 1? Which one would be your number 2, your number 3 and 4? So go to menti.com on your phone or web browser, add that code, and then rank those. Okay, we have our first ranking. Okay, our second ranking is there. We have a third person, a fourth person. All right, can we get, I think we are many in the group. Can we get to at least 8? Okay, so far, most of you seem to feel that incident swarming would be most relevant to your ITSM practice, because that involves a collaborative way in which you can bring the teams together to solve incident faster, which is usually one of the main focus areas in ITSM practice. It's about addressing incidents. All right. Secondly, we are looking at problem retrospective, because after a team has solved a problem, we want to come back and ask ourselves the question, how did we tackle that problem and how can we do it better? So here we are not talking about whether we solved the problem, but rather our approach to solving the problem. Could we do it better? And so a problem retrospective would be useful. A team daily stand-up could be something you could think about from an ITSM perspective, where you spend 15 minutes a day just thinking, where are we as a team in terms of our backlog? Where are we in terms of work that is done? Is there a significant blocker that we need addressed today? And then you can also track your improvement initiatives as a team or as a department on a Kanban board.
Philip, we received your question.
All right. Philip has a question. What are some of the common challenges faced in the implementation of Agile ITSM, and how can they be overcome? Thank you, Philip. You are those students who read ahead of the syllabus. That is our next topic, challenges and tips in adopting Agile ITSM. All right, if we read the 17th State of Agile report, and by the way, you can Google this report. It's online, you can read about it. The top complaints, and I'll talk about the top 4. Organizational resistance, leadership, not enough leadership participation, inadequate management support or sponsorship, and business teams not understanding what Agile is all about. So if you think about it, if people do not know what Agile is all about, and the leadership does not promote Agile way of working, or your culture is so entrenched on bureaucracy, silos, fixed processes, then you will have a challenge. And this is happening around the world. This survey happens around the world. These are some of the challenges that you have. So we need to tackle organizational resistance or the culture. Then we need leadership to be at the forefront. And then we need to educate people in terms of understanding what is Agile, why Agile, and are we going the Agile way or not? So those are some of the things to look at. Where Agile struggles, and this is when organizations adopt Agile and then they find it's not working, some of the things is if you have many legacy systems, all right? So if your IT environment still has majority or the critical elements being hosted on legacy systems, then you will struggle adopting Agile because Agile is all about flexibility, all right? If you have siloed teams, then you will struggle. If your culture is not pro-Agile, so for instance, speaking openly, being open about failures, being open about resource constraints, being open to allow anyone in the team to suggest improvements, then Agile will struggle in your organization. So if you think about it, the main challenges that we have are cultural resistance, the whole changing to adopt our Agile change of working. And we also have additional challenges where our existing processes are bureaucratic. The measurements that we have do not support an Agile way of working in terms of our metrics and our KPIs. And then our tools that we use for ITSM do not support an Agile way of working. So if our culture is anti the Agile way of thinking, then we will struggle, especially where you have bureaucracy, where management is the final say, where anyone is afraid when I've caused an incident, I'm afraid of speaking out because we fear. In terms of the workload we face, we don't have the way our work is structured, we don't have breathing room. We don't have time to do reviews and retrospectives because we are just dealing with firefighting every day. Then our culture would affect us. Change management, just adopting Agile way of working. If we don't have an organizational change management approach where we have a roadmap and we have support from leadership and the resources, because we need to train people, we need the tools and the like. These are the main challenges that we would face. So how do we overcome these challenges? In terms of cultural resistance, then clear communication is important, training is important, and then we need our leadership. We need our IT directors, our IT managers, our business leadership to actually say they support Agile, okay? And it needs to come out in their communication, it needs to come out in our strategy. In terms of change management issue, then you need a formal OCM plan. So an organizational change plan that actually says we are going to change as an organization. These are the timelines. Get stakeholders involved, all the different stakeholders. Let business understand when we become Agile, what does it mean for requests? What does it mean for changes? What does it mean for incidents? Okay, and then get the appropriate resources. Okay, we need the right resources because if a team is overworked with tickets, then there is no way they have time for reviews and retrospectives, all right? Then additional strategies, get the right tools. also get the right metrics. You need to start moving from individual metrics to team-based metrics that address the whole silo way of thinking. We need to encourage open communication and knowledge sharing as well. From an adoption perspective, think about starting with a pilot. You can start with a small pilot, maybe take one service or one group of services, and then say we are going to manage these services in an agile way. So what does that mean for the changes to these services? What does that mean for handling incidents and problems and requests related to these services? And then now implement an iterative approach from improvement, then build on this, and then get feedback from stakeholders. What is working, what technique or methodology is working, and then look at how do we transition from silos to cross-functional teams. Start building these teams. There might be a dotted line. So you are in database team, but you actually belong to an agile team or an agile tribe, and you support a particular group, a cross-functional group. So organizations operate with that, and then address collaboration by using collaboration tools more. And then make sure that we review our objectives so that all our objectives are tied towards a common goal, so that we are working as a team rather than individuals, all right? We can also research on companies that successfully have adopted Agile. Think about Spotify, ING Bank, and Capital One. You can be able to Google about these different companies and see how they did it. For Spotify, they used squads. And so squads operated like they focus on a specific aspect of the ITSM life cycle. And this actually benefited them in terms of faster faster response to incidents and requests, improved collaboration, and improved adaptability. For ING Bank, they went into squads and tribes, so they restructured their IT for better alignment. And then what happened? They got increased efficiency, greater transparency, and enhanced customer satisfaction because of speed. And then for Capital One, how they did it is through a digital transformation initiative. So they rolled out a digital transformation initiative across the organization, and they integrated Agile into the ITSM framework. So they brought in Scrum and Kanban for incident and problem, cross-functional teams for service delivery, and then they did a lot of automation to reduce the manual efforts around their changes through DevOps. One of the other things you need to think about is moving in terms of adopting high levels of alignment and high levels of autonomy, okay? So when you are thinking about autonomy means that teams are able to make their own decisions. And so we empower teams. And so what does leadership mean? Leadership provides us direction, but allows teams to make the decision, all right? And so high alignment and high autonomy would be the best target, where management actually allows teams to figure out solutions for themselves, and then management is providing direction and strategy. So direction through strategy, and then the actual resources. So the teams have end-to-end accountability. So we need to think about becoming agile. So it's not just we are doing Scrum, but rather we as an organization are agile. Our environment means that the team works together as a whole, and we work on execution, and we are constantly reviewing our framework and working. So our parting shot, this was from Gartner in 2020, who said in the research that by 2023, if teams do not adopt Agile within their ITSM practices, they are highly likely to be ignored or bypassed by the rest of the organization who will adopt an Agile way of working. And that's the worst thing we would want to be like. When people think about ITSM as a team, they think that you guys are backward. They think that you guys are not relevant to your organization. And so if you don't adopt Agile, and that's what Gardner says, then you'll find ITSM teams are seen as they are not relevant. And that brings us to the end of our slide deck. Questions, comments from the floor?
Philip, I don't know if Joseph covered your question conclusively. I don't know if you're satisfied.
Yeah, so Joseph, you covered very well. We appreciate your effort to train us on this. I think this is the fourth one we are doing, and I think it's been very helpful. You're very articulate and to the point. So from my end, I'm very happy. And I think all the participants are getting something from this training.
Thank you.
So I have one last question. How can you, or what are the metrics or KPIs should be tracked to measure the success of Agile ITSM?
All right, good. I debated about adding a slide on metrics because it becomes very technical and we have a very short time. But because Agile is thinking about delivering work quickly and iteratively, then the kind of metrics you're looking at is things like cycle time, where you're looking at the turnaround time. So in ITSM, we'll be looking at, what's our turnaround time to processing a change? What's our turnaround time to addressing an incident or certain types of requests? So what you can do is you can like group types of requests and ask yourself, what is our turnaround time? And then how can we improve that turnaround time? If it's changes, if it's a normal change that has to go through review, CAB, security, risk, and all those different hurdles we put in, we ask ourselves the question, for this group of changes, what's our turnaround time to get that change ready to deploy? And how can we make our process more effective? So we usually look at turnaround time. The other metric to look at is metrics around collaboration and communication. And this now involved, measurement of culture. And so you can use our internal satisfaction surveys to ask the question, are we collaborative? Are we communicating? We look at, are there changes that were implemented and executed and people did not know about? Were there incidents that happened and relevant teams were not notified? We collect data on this, and this points to a picture of whether or not we are agile as an organization from a collaboration and communication. So think turnaround time, think collaboration, and then ultimately think customer satisfaction. From our internal satisfaction surveys with our business users, are they happy with our handling? Do they find with our handling of their requests, with our improvements, do they see that ITSM is actually at the forefront? So those are some of the metrics you'd look at. So improvement if you think about balance scorecard, then you would think about the knowledge part and the process part. So our process is more effective, and are we more collaborative, communicative, knowledge sharing as an organization? Those are some of the things we'll look at. But, Agile metrics is another course on its own. When you talk about OKRs and all those sort of things, we can think about doing a follow-up webinar on those, because that will take quite a bit of time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your response. I don't know if we have any other questions just before we close.
Remember, there's a voucher.
Okay, so I'll assume that we have no other questions. Joseph, thank you so much for taking us through Scrum, Kanban, I personally have learned a lot. I hope that applies to everyone as well. So with that being said, I think we've come to the end of the webinar. Thank you so much once again for joining. For the ones who have participated, HM Philip, we will be reaching out with the details of how you'll receive your vouchers and merchandise. With that being said, we will be sending another invite probably in 2 months' time for the next webinar. Please purpose to register and join. With that, I think we can finalize and close the meeting. Have a beautiful day ahead.
Thank you, everyone. Please drop us your feedback on Mentimeter, as you can see on the screen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Ano nasema goodbye.